Good afternoon, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. I want us to start the first leg of our meeting of the Standing Committee of Public Accounts of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. For purposes of looking into the annual report as well as into the Auditor General report of the Department of Community Safety and Police Oversight and its entity, which is the Liquor Authority, as well as the Ombudsman. Now, the meeting, as I normally say, it's in three forms, where the first part, the Scopa Committee will be interacting with the Auditor General in an in-committee session and be briefed by the Auditor General about the audit performance of the department and its entity. And the second part will be where we are going to be joined by the department itself and its entities. And after we finished, we will allow members of the public who have shown interest either in person or virtually, if they want to interact with the report and if they want to ask questions, we'll do that. Now, as we are about to start, and also let me also mention we are also being joined by the audit committees of both the department as well as the entities. Can I just get an indication of the presence of the members for record purposes?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chairperson, and good afternoon, AG and Audit Committee Chair. My name is Matlodi Maseko, and I'm the permanent member of the Public Accounts Committee in Western Cape Provincial Parliament.
Thank you very much, Honorable.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, AG and colleagues. My name is Derek America. I'm a member of the committee.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon to everyone present. Bulelo Isaac Sleku, member of SCOPA. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon, colleague. My name is Gideon Boston. I'm an alternate for this committee, and from some part of the committee, I'll be standing in for Member America.
Thanks very much. Now, what I normally do is that as we are going to start with the AG, you don't necessarily have to introduce your team, but then as and when members are speaking, if they may please introduce themselves as well as their positions as well. That will go the same with the audit committees as well. Now, first I will allow the AG to talk us through the report without reading it word for word, because I take it as read and raise only those salient points that you think needs to be brought also to our attention for purposes of emphasis. And thereafter, I will allow the audit committees and then members if they want points of clarity, comments, or questions. AG.
Thank you.
Minister, HOD, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second leg of our meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament for purposes of looking into the annual report of the Department of Community Safety and Police Oversight together with its entity, as well as looking into the Auditor General report of South Africa about the department. This is the second leg, as I've said, of which it was preceded by a meeting of us as a committee of SCOPA together with the Auditor General, where we were briefed by the AG and the audit committees about the outcomes of the department's audit. Now, the second leg is with the department, again, together with its entities. It is an open meeting. In other words, it's also open to members of the public who want to participate. So after we have allowed members of the committees and other members of the provincial legislature to interact with the report, we will give an opportunity to those members of the public who have shown interest, either in person or who might have joined virtually. And thereafter, we are going to close. That will be the third leg of our meeting. So, Honorable Minister, I'm not going to say introduce your delegation. It's too big for us to remember. And then what we will request is that as and when members speak, if they may please introduce themselves as well as the positions that they are holding. We are looking at Section E, Section C, Section E, as well as Section F of the annual report. And of course, together with the Auditor General's report and the Audit Committee report. So I'm going, if there are any opening remarks, Honorable Minister, you'd like to make, followed by the HOD, and thereafter we will allow members to ask questions, comments, and point of clarity on the report. Honorable Minister.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. Good afternoon, members of the Standing Committee. Good afternoon to the AG together with the Audit Committee. From my side, I'm wanting to be as brief as possible. The year under review has showed a determination from this department and its entity, but also a determination from officials that is sitting to my right, but all the way down to our entire department. We are very clear in our assessment of community safety, policing, in that there is a number of cogs attached to ensuring that communities are ultimately safer. Yes, it is sound policing policies. Yes, it is our SAPS members, law enforcement, but the key cog also is good governance. And for the last 15 years, this department has showcased, and I believe that is unprecedented in the government, 15 consecutive clean audits, the conversations we are also having with, and the good leadership that we are seeing from Mr. Strauss and the audit committee about how we are seeing actual value for money. So we are looking at having these difficult conversations, and we are looking forward to this engagement. But even from the onset, if I can say dankie, baie dankie vir almal op my regterkant. Thank you so much from Mr. George to the chairperson of the Liquor Board, to the AG, to the Audit Committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. HOD.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson and members. Good afternoon. As Minister has already alluded to, we're very proud of our 15th consecutive clean audit outcome, which is unprecedented, but also proud of the clean audit outcomes of the Western Cape Liquor Authority and also the Chrysalis Academy, which is linked to the department. We have achieved 93% of our APPs and 98.9% of our budget has been spent. We do believe that we performed beyond our oversight mandate as well. We have worked closely with the SAPs as it relates to oversight and to improve service delivery, but also supporting them in terms of their operations as well. We've also worked very closely and supported our other partners in safety, like municipalities, neighborhood watches, and CPFs to capacitate them as well, so that we ensure that there is safety throughout the province. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. I see your hand was up.
Chair and members, Ronnie Kingwell, Chairman of the Western Cape Liquor Board. Again, our privilege to report to Scopa. As I mentioned this morning, this will be about my 15th year that I'm reporting to Scopa in various forms and shapes and stuff like that. And each year we do look forward to it. As Chairman of the committee, would it be possible to deal with the liquor board first? We'll be short and sweet and to the point, but I'll leave that call with you, sir.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Kingwell. What we normally do is that we will allow members to ask questions. And then when they ask questions, I don't normally go department by department or section by section. Now, because what we do, we regard the report as read. That's why we are not going to go word for word per report or per section. So when they ask question, in point of clarity, I will just ask them to ask question. Each member is going to ask on C, E, and F, as well as on the entities. But then when it comes to responding, if you want to respond first, I don't have a problem. We will allow you to be the first to respond if there are questions on the Liquor Authority. That's not going to be a problem. Honorable members, can I get an indication of those members who would like to ask questions? As I've indicated to you that we are dealing with E, C, E, and F. And then you ask question in all of those sections at once, and the response is going to be like that. Honorable Maseko.
Thank you very much, Chair. And again, I need to congratulate the department also for the unqualified outcome that is sustained, and we really appreciate and it's noted all the efforts that you are doing. Just a few questions from me. From C section, Chair, on page for the department, on page 110, one of the risks 5, I'm trying to understand the heading of inadequate oversight over and support provided to the Western Cape Liquor Authority as one of your risks. Why the heading being that way? Because I tend to believe you have responsibility of making sure that it's adequate. Why do you list it as an inadequate? Are you allowing yourself the escape clause of if you don't do it, then you say already, Scopa, I mentioned that is the risk. What's the reason for that heading? If we can get the understanding to that. And also, Chair, I asked I just threw the net to the AG, but I want to ask the department. So the Liquor Board has been, I think, the past 2 financial years, if it's more than that, I just looked at the past 2 financial years, there's been an underspending. Now the question is, why allocate more if your history tells you that there's underspending that is happening all the time? Isn't it that we should have maybe taken that to direct that funds to something else? Because already you can see that is not being, there's money that is being spent, or your line base, how do you tweak and change it to make sure that you can use what they collect, if maybe the underspending comes from what they are collecting, to make sure that you allocate that money to yourself? Because we can't watch the report all the time that there's underspending on the liquor boards. Surely something has to happen that will show a different results. And another one, I think it will be the unspent grants from the Department of Community Safety. There's an indication that you received a grant from DDAT and the money was unutilized due to the initiation project for a client service center related to uncertainties around building ownership. Now, I just want to find out, I mean, the business plan when it comes, there are the due diligence 1, 2, 3, 4. So if that was not unspent, that grant, what happened? If we can get the story behind that, we'll appreciate that. I'm going to stop there, Chair. I'll get another chance after.
Thank you very much. What we'll do, Minister, we allow members, all of them, to ask questions. Unless you want to correct something or there's a point of order you want to raise.
Thank you so much. We are so looking forward after that first number of questions. May I please request via you, Chairperson, to the member, if we can get a page reference that will, and which report that will assist us.
Of the unspent or because of the inadequate oversight is page 110. Okay, the second one is the notes for Scopa from the Auditor General. So it's not on the.
It's in the Auditor General report.
It's
briefing.
Yeah, it's in the Auditor General report on the reasons for underspending and over collection of revenue. So there is a handing of the unspent grants, and there is the grants from docs and
which page is that, Honorable Maseko?
4.
Because page 4. Page 4 of the Auditor General's report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't get that, Chair. You don't have it. Okay, concentrate on 110 and I'll sort you out. In the meantime.
I told you what the you don't get it. No. Okay, that's fine, Minister. We'll deal with that when it comes.
We'll deal with it.
The AG will come in as well and assist on that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the next member. Honorable Sileko. I normally I'm used to that pattern, so
No, Chair, thank you very much. Allow me to greet the Minister and the HOD and the whole team. Chair, I will start with a question that I've posed to the Premier yesterday. And the reason that I'm doing that is because of the statement saying, wow, 15 consecutive clean audits. What is next? What is next? This is the same question I've asked the Premier yesterday. We have been consistent in terms of getting clean, unqualified audits. And we spend a lot of money paying audit fees. And my question to the department, what is next? What is the next level? Also, in terms of, I'll also go to the presentation of Oscopa. One of the reasons for under expenditure has been the slow filling of vacancies. Slow filling of vacancies. And with the economic climate currently, where the Minister of Finance has been very vocal saying that we need to cut. Do we see that statement of saying slow filling of vacancies changing? Or are we going to see the same statement next year due to the pronouncement of the Minister of Finance? And then let's go to 109. One of the key strategic risk considered and addressed during the year is risk number 1, where it actually says that the department will continue to monitor inefficiencies in terms of that, and also supporting municipalities in terms of law enforcement and making sure. So now with also linked to what has been pronounced in terms of cutting and cutting and cutting. Does the department see it being able to mitigate this particular risk, which they have identified this year and addressed? Because one of the statements that was shared with us by the coordinating department, which is the department of the Premier, the inadequate financial resources is the highest risk that this particular province is facing. Not only this province, but the whole country, because financially, gaan het baie moeilik for ons as South Africa. So in terms of your risk that you were able to address in this financial year, do you foresee being able to address it next year? That is this. And I beg for indulgence, colleagues. And then in terms of risk, in terms of page 111, I always view the staff or the officials as the asset of a department. They are the asset of the department. There is nothing that you can do without your staff. And then your risk number 2 is talks about the safety of departmental staff working in high risk areas. Colleagues, during the unrest or the taxi, we have seen, we have heard, and we have witnessed law enforcement officers being killed. And up to today, we don't even know who did that. And I want to ask the department that, would the department say to me as a member of SCOPA that the measures that were put in place to mitigate this particular risk in terms of your assets, which is your staff, in working in high risk areas are adequate to guarantee their safety? Then let's go to question 113. One would always appreciate that during investigations, there will be steps for disciplinary hearings, and there will be cases referred to law enforcement areas. In the cases that has been attended to by the department, is there any cases that has led to the dismissal of any staff? If yes, would you be able to give us some details? I don't want the names. I just wanted the case. What was it all about? Let's go to, why is she? Chair, can I continue? No, because I hear she say highball. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Chair, thank you very much. In my previous life, I was a member of the National Council of Provinces. And we all know that there was a fire there, that today we don't have a parliament. And then you go to page 115, and they talk about housekeeping through the department continues to be a hazard and is blocking pathway and access to the equipment. Excessive stocking boxes used to hold financial documents on the fourth floor. The boxes are high fire hazard and tripping hazards. What are you doing in addressing that particular risk? The piling of boxes that prohibits you to gain access to the fire extinguishers. It's 115, and the heading is is number 6, health and safety environment issues. It talks about the boxes. What are you guys doing as a department? Have you removed those boxes? Should there become a fire tomorrow that you'll be able to access the fire extinguisher? That's what I would want to know. And then my last question, honorable colleagues, it's 172. It's number 2, late and non-payment of suppliers. I just wanted to get more specifics in terms of that particular error that has caused that there was a late payment to a supplier. Was it a system error or was it a human error? If it was a human error, what have you learned as a department and how have you dealt with it? If it is a system error, what has caused the problem and how have you dealt with it? Chair, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Good afternoon to colleagues and the Minister from the Department of Community Safety. Chair, I think on governance of the department, Part C, when one considers, I think the section on key strategic risks, which are presented by the department. I must say, Minister, perhaps with your department, you could help me understand, as you in page 111, where you see the risk of the limited ability of the department to effectively monitor police conduct. And therefore, you're saying you would be, in a way, reorganizing yourself to this particular function of oversight of the police. If you can just explain more about how you intend to do this, one from a budgeting point of view and from a human resource point of view. That are you then increasing your functions or expanding a particular program for this? And if so, what's the financial implications of this? And in your risks, Minister, and I think you speak in risk 4 about limited ability of policing resources. I'm not sure, because also one having listened to you in the House, I'm not sure the extent to which your intergovernmental relations are actually functioning optimally because you've got a concurrent function. And so one would be actually expecting to see this as a risk if indeed you raise these particular issues, not because I want to rewrite your risk plan, but I'm just saying as a concurrent function, surely your intergovernmental relations between yourself, the national department and municipalities becomes an important relationship in delivering on your mandate. And then moving from this particular section, Minister, I'm just wanting to ask, I think it's also, I think I saw it in the auditor's notes, the underspending on COE and goods and services. And I'm raising this because I think one of the things you would normally raise in the House is the number of police versus the population size. And therefore, in terms of your current complement in the department, is this current complement in ratio appropriate to the number or the activities that you have to undertake? And I'm raising this in context to, once again, to an underspending on COE, which is something that I think is actually a normal that we always deal with as SCOPA across departments. And one is always concerned, particularly in service delivery interfacing departments like yourselves. And what would have been the underspending on EPWP funds? What exactly is the problem there? And then on page 239, and I think 238 on the conditional grants and transfers to municipalities. One just notes, if we consider the information provided there, the West Coast that only spent 4% of what was allocated to it, with others below only overstrand on the K9 unit that actually spent its money sufficiently. Can you explain what are the challenges of spending and the implications of this in terms of service delivery? Because we've talked about safety-related projects and people are spending only 4%, 37%, 29%. How does that impact on the overall safety? And then if you look at page 239, one considers that the city of Cape Town, in terms of LEAP, would have previously received about 165, I think, million. And that actually was almost 3 times their allocation in 2022-23. That's page 239. Are we in the same book? Okay. All right. But when you look at what was spent, there's an underspending there. The spending is only 69%. So one is just interested, and I think it links to the question Member Maseko was asking, because I think we would normally hear the notion that says, why give people more money if there's a demonstration, even the baseline? Because if you use 2021 as the baseline, perhaps you could explain why you had to have such a spike in allocation to the city of Cape Town, but the same city of Cape Town could only spend 69% of those funds. And when you talk about school resource officers, actually, even there, my question there is that I'm assuming this is salaries. I'm not sure whether I'm getting it proper when you say when it's school resource officers, and if so, how many schools are involved? How many officers per school are allocated, and what has been the effectiveness of this in terms of value for money for this program? My last one, which is on the department chair, I will take the entity after, is on page 241. Because on 241, I would just want to understand what is the difference, or what's the criteria that do you use to allocate resource between the neighborhood watches and the community policing forums, and what numbers are involved in that budget allocated there? Thanks, Chair.
Said you had questioned on entities, rather ask them now so that they respond, or you want to keep that for later? Okay. Honorable Maseko.
Chair, I forgot just one question. On page 122 of the department, the 8.3 resolution, maybe if we can get the unpacking of the discontinuation of the LEAP. It talks about the LEAP that because of financial constraints that there's a possibility that it might be stopped. The report is there. So I just want to find out to what an extent is that going to happen, or what is happening now, and if it's being continued with the budget cuts that Member Select was talking about, sustainability of that. Do you see it moving at the pace that you wish for, or you wanted to do it as you started with the business plan of implementing the LEAP enforcement? I think that's all that I wanted to ask for now, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Minister and HOD will rely on you. How do you direct the responses and those people we are going to give to respond?
Thank you so much, Chairperson. I'll give a broad overview of the questions that were posed. From there, it will be the HOD, it will be chief directors that will give input together with the CFO. It's okay if we do it that way. I highly appreciate the questions. Thank you so much. If I can start at the very end, the LEAP program has been budgeted for and it's allocated over the MTF up until 2025-2026 financial year, seeing that this is a step up from the Western Cape government. It's an additional funding allocation. We will continue as a department advocate for that particular funding, even in the outer years, because the independent assessment by Dr. Jean Redpath, our own internal assessments has showed that LEAP is working. We are seeing across our country that murder is increasing. Here in our province, it is stabilizing. However, in priority areas, 7 out of the 13 areas are seeing reductions. But we know that we have a very long way to go, considering as a country, we are seeing murder increasing. It's becoming volatile. So definitely from our side, we will appreciate the support from members of this House to continue advocating that LEAP should be budgeted for. When I look at the budgets between CPFs and neighborhood watches, the CFO together with the HOD will come in on this one. The one thing that we also want to have this engagement with Scopa is that we are always looking at the neighborhood watches and the CPFs, and in my view, not to treat any stakeholder differently. Not to treat any stakeholder differently. We have 151 CPFs in our province, and we have over 500 accredited neighborhood watches. Their colleagues can already see the discrepancies between the amount of neighborhood watches and the amount of CPFs. I can also confirm, and that colleagues in this House will probably be aware, that 12.7 million has been allocated to the CPFs via the National Minister that went to the PC's office as a direct result, in part because of submissions made by the Western Cape government and by Gauteng during MINMEC 6 months ago. I'm delighted that that money has already reached some of the CPFs, especially in our priority areas. But the breakdown through you, Chairperson, to Member Nkondlo, the breakdown will be given by the department in the specifics. But it is important if we see that correlation between the amount and the amount of CPFs. I will also give the school resource officers, David, if you potentially can have that numbers handy. I am aware that also, and the technical aspects I would want the department to answer, in that the underspending that we are seeing here. Colleagues, you are also aware that because of the financial years between the Western Cape government and national and local government run slightly differently. But it is a matter that we consistently look at, because we wouldn't want to have any underspending. But HOD, if you can come in that regard. I noted a question with regards to underspending in the EPWP. Based on this particular report, and if I see the one EPWP allocation that is on page 195, it's roughly 3.8 million rand that comes from the national coffers in terms of public works. We top that up by approximately extra 30 million rand. The department might tell me it's more than 30 million rand, but that will also be because we are very clear that young people need to have opportunities, and that particular EPWP, we wouldn't want any underspending in that. That has been one of the things that we are looking at closely. Is the budget appropriate to the need? That is one question, Member Nkondlo, that I also asked myself, and I was very saddened. I was very saddened less than 2 months ago when we had a benchmark assessment with our colleagues in KZN. And our colleagues in KZN, to do what we are doing, they currently have a budget of 250 million. 250 million.
How much do you
776. And KZN is double the amount of people that is in the Western Cape. So I look at it from that. Is the budget appropriate? On the one hand, I would say this in front of the Premier, front of the AG, in front of Scopa. I would always want this department to have more money, so that we can give more money to CPFs, more money to neighborhood watches. I would always say that. And it's very difficult to say that the budget is appropriate considering the need that this department is exposed to. But also, if I benchmark it against other provinces, we can see that monies are being allocated here very differently to what is happening in other provinces. But coupled to that, the entire budget of the Western Cape, where safety is concerned in terms of the Western Cape Safety Plan, a number of departments has a role to play towards safety. It's not only our department, but the work that David will speak about in terms of the resource officers, that education plays a role in that regard because we are dealing with learners in our high-risk areas, but that will be clarified in that regard. But I do appreciate the spirit in which questions was also asked. It gives us insight to actually look a little deeper. With regards to the risk, Member Nkondlo, you raise a very interesting point, saying that if I got the question correctly, that we have not listed intergovernmental relations as a risk. I'm not sure if I got that as that, because the City of Cape Town in this week again is on record to say that the working relationships between the City of Cape Town and the South African Police Service has never been this solid. Neighborhood watches, CPFs are echoing that there's working relationships, or we are working towards working relationships. And we have seen the working relationship between our department and the South African Police Service, according to General Patekile, has never been as solid as it is now. I wouldn't even want to attribute that to the fact that I've been appointed a year ago. I would want to say, give credit, because we have had difficult conversations. We have had tough conversations, but in terms of the intergovernmental relations, we are steadily monitoring and making sure that we can have these difficult conversations. Colleagues will also be noting that when we release the crime stats, for example, over the last year, for the very first time in our province, every quarter, the briefing happens together with the media briefing. Every year, every quarter, it happens. That has never happened before, because as a government, we want to take responsibility, but also in our oversight, make sure that that leads to better service delivery. But I take the point, and I will take that to the senior management team to look at the intergovernmental relations and how that risk could potentially be added. I value that input. In terms of expanding the functions, I so appreciate that you mentioned functions. I want to get away from the word power. Functions. 206(4)(c) of the Constitution says that in terms of 206(1) says that national policing is the responsibility of the national minister. The drafters of the Constitution went on by 2, 3, and 4. Number 4, under the headline, the sub-headline, it says functions allocated to the provincial executive. The drafters went on to say A, B, and C actually speaks directly towards allocated in terms of national policing policy to the provincial executive. And that is what we are advocating for. We are currently engaging the Civilian Secretariat, who has been instructed by the National Minister of Police to undertake provincial policy assessments and engagements, and that will be part of our assessment in order to see how we can expand our functions in terms of national policing policy, so that we can take that powers that the Constitution and the drafters of the Constitution envisaged actually at the time of drafting the constitution. That particular narrative is resonating in Gauteng, it's resonating in KZN and in other provinces. When we talk about the oversight and the limitations there too. Section 19 of the Community Safety Act provides us with legwork in order to engage the South African Police Service and to obtain relevant information. That particular piece of legislation has paved the way to ensure that we can actually take our oversight further. And that has led to us having conversations, but also engagements with the South African Police Service. But it's always at the point where we don't have the executive authority to institute a measure like disciplinary action, etc. And one of the functions that can easily be attributed or allocated to a provincial government is actually the function of the disciplinary processes, because we have seen a breakdown in terms of SAPS's disciplinary processes internally. Officers have told us directly they are not prepared. They go to a particular disciplinary committee and there's a union rep and little to no consequences often flow from it. That is sentiments across the country. It's an issue, it's a concern that has been resonating at MINMEC as well. So a function in terms of the Constitution 2064C can actually be attributed and allocated already to expand our oversight, because it is a national competency, but we are not just merely wanting to release reports and slam the SAPs and say A, B, and C is happening. We are wanting to see how we strengthen the arm of the South African Police Service. We do that through various means, including the engagements, and we are seeing steady progress in that regard. With regards to late payment, I think the CFO will handle that particular one. And then also, I can confirm the recent assessment has, in terms of the OHS, has showed considerable improvements. I often, or not as often as I want to, because I'm often all the way in various communities, but I have had walks on various floors in the department, and I look out for such matters that you have listed, but I will leave that to the chief directors to give more adequate information. The safety of staff is a big concern. The safety of staff across nursing, across social development has been raised. As a department, we have drafted the policy in that regard on how certain matters must already be escalated. That featured prominently in Cabinet less than 3 months ago, because it was raised by the Department of Health and the Department of Social Development. But the question that you ask, Member Seleko, also gives me the insight that as a department that we have stepped up, and often we forget that in order to prevent crime, to combat crime, and to investigate crime sits in a certain department. And as a department, if we are stepping up, often it could be seen is that we are needing to do so much more. So to prevent crime, when someone goes into Nyanga to go and serve residents, the South African Police Service in their very mandate, which I know is broad, is to prevent crime. And if that crime isn't being prevented, it's ultimately as a result of that mandate not being fulfilled, which is in the Constitution. But we always look at how we are able to help. But Gillian might be able to, Ms. Lutz might be able to give further clarity. The slow filling of vacancies, I will let the department speak to that as well. We are looking at, and I've said earlier on, and I'm not sure if they looked at me funny, but the people here dislike me the most, because we have stretched ourselves and we have reprioritized. I forgot that question about we have reprioritized, and especially I would want Hanmarie, Advocate van Zyl, to even come in with how we have been able to reprioritize within the current budget, because we wanted to look at what is the need, where do we need to step in from a service delivery point of view, because we always look at how can we stay within the budget but still reprioritize so that we can actually serve the residents. And I'm quite delighted, David, and that particular directorate, what you have done in that space. But 1110, the inadequate oversight, it speaks to that question. Because of laws that is currently now in our country, inadequate oversight leads even back to the IPID bill, the amendments thereof. If we look at the independence of IPID, and where the ED for IPID must essentially sit. So laws have been drafted many years ago at a national level. We would love Section 2064C, where functions can actually be allocated and expand on our oversight, because the expansion on oversight we have had to do. For example, we do reports, but we also do post-monitoring reports. What that means is that the Domestic Violence Act needs to be implemented in Delft, in Khayelitsha, in Gugulethu, all over. We monitor SAPS's compliance with implementing the act, because we are wanting legislation and the laws to work for the residents. And then when we see that there's gaps, we make recommendations, but we also monitor the recommendations. And at times, it is simple management matters that can actually lead to better to better oversight. Because if there is a sergeant that is the main officer allocated in terms of the Domestic Violence Act, to get information from a colonel, there's rank and file, it can be very difficult. And we have made recommendations in that regard. One area like Umfuleni, where the most senior officer was actually allocated to make sure that the Domestic Violence Act is implemented. So we are looking at these measures to actually step up the unspent grants. And then the one question that I will end off with is, what is next? You asked after 15 consecutive clean audits, that is 16.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Maybe I should start with that one first. Think in terms of our clean audits, it doesn't mean that we have arrived. There's still a lot of work to be done. Yes, next, I was teasing Minister. I said, yeah, the next is 16 clean audits, but clean audits needs to translate into excellent service delivery. So we take our mandate to deliver services very seriously. So I don't think we will ever stop trying. I think the clean audit is just the first level and the first step. But we have to see improved service delivery and safety in our province as well. Just in terms of the underspending of the Liquor Authority, they will answer that. Just in terms of then with the risk one, where we speak about the our oversight mandate, I think definitely it will be impacted by budgetary cuts. Because we would like to be able to assess every police station every year, but then also not just do an assessment, but also do post-monitoring, so that we ensure that the recommendations that we provide to the SAPS and municipal police services are actually implemented. So we would be affected by budgetary cuts, because we would have to go back to looking at prioritizing certain police stations, etc., which would also mean that our staff members would be impacted, because you would have fewer staff members if there are COE cuts having to attend to more work as well. So definitely, if there are cost containment measures, which we've already been given an indication of in terms of cutting our budget by perhaps 55 million, it will have serious implications for our department, considering our baseline budget, excluding LEAP, is quite small. Our budget has only increased over the past few years by 2%. So we are doing more with less. Then in terms of the safety of staff, this is something that we also take very seriously, considering we have frontline security officers and security personnel. We do have a standard operating procedure in place, so that if the situation becomes volatile, we will withdraw them from a situation. However, over and beyond that, we have been tasked to, together with the Department of the Premier, to develop a policy for the safety of staff for the Western Cape government. We have developed a concept note, which Minister has alluded to, which we have presented, which was tabled at Cabinet. So we're working towards this policy to ensure that our staff are safe throughout the province. We also have proposed that a provincial command center be set up, where we would be able to then ensure that when there are incidents of unrest, taxi violence, but then also incidents where our staff members are affected, we would be able to immediately ensure that there is a an appropriate and immediate response by any law enforcement agency, whether it be traffic or the South African Police Service, that would be immediately able to respond. So that we are busy with that to set up this command center with the Department of Local Government and the Disaster Management Center. In terms of our risk in relation to the Liquor Authority, the inadequate oversight, perhaps we need to relook at the wording. Because we do believe we have effective oversight. However, there was a decision taken some time ago by Provincial Treasury and Cabinet that the Liquor Authority needed to be self-sustainable. Now, however, that being said, and Liquor Authority would probably lament on that a bit more, that any increases in liquor license fees, which would lead to them becoming self-sustainable, has to be agreed to by the Minister of Finance and our Minister. It's very difficult in this economic climate that we find ourselves to get the increases that are required to ensure the Liquor Authority is self-sustainable. And maybe that is not, it's almost like an indictment on ourselves. So we will definitely change that, because it's not our oversight, but in order to reach that objective of self-sustainability for the Liquor Authority, and we play a role in that regard. The colleagues can add if they'd like. In terms of the cases that are referred to, there were no cases that led to dismissal. The one matter was in relation to the bid rigging or cover quoting, where we had a company that it was two companies basically that were, or the same company with different names, and that was brought to our attention, and that was reported to the police. The others were in relation to nepotism, where an employee resigned, and another matter which was unsubstantiated. And then another matter which was also related to procurement at the Ombudsman's office, that was also investigated and unsubstantiated. And I know the colleagues from Provincial Forensic Services are also here, but those were the matters that are referred to there. In terms of page 172, the payments that were not made timeously, that was to the GMT. I think it was also our misunderstanding when we considered timeous payments, we did not consider other government entity that we had to pay to. The AGS found that on average, we make payments in 5 days. I know the 30-day is what you look to. It used to be on average 12 days. We're now making it in 5 days. However, GMT payments were not made timeously because reconciliations were not done. However, that having been brought to our attention, we are now ensuring that it's made timeously. Just also want to ensure you that all our fire exits are clear, that we've done an OHS audit, and we are fully compliant. All the hazards have been addressed. We've also done an emergency evacuation drill recently, and the exits were clear, but it is something to constantly monitor, because it does relate to our office accommodation and space, and it also relates to us having a fully functional registry, so that those boxes were actually paper that we need to ensure are properly filed, but then that our staff are accommodated, and we're looking towards a more modernized office setting with smaller desks, etc., so there is more space for our staff. In terms of the other, the COE complement and underspend, I did indicate in the session earlier this morning that it's very important to us, especially on this culture journey that we've embarked on, to attract the right persons in the department. There are two of our posts in SMS posts that were vacant since 2021. We've interviewed, I think, 3 times, advertised, etc., but we just didn't find the right persons. We are now, one is at shortlisting stage and the other is at interview stage. So we're hoping to attract the right people. We just don't want to fill posts for the sake of filling them, but ensure whoever we appoint is going to contribute positively to the department's culture journey, but also to meet our strategic objectives. In terms of the EPWP underspend, I think Minister's already alluded to it. We get a grant from National of 3.8 million, but it's 34 million in total of that we've added on top of that grant, because we are prioritizing work opportunities for youth. There are currently approximately 900 youth that are paid EPWP stipends, of which we create work opportunities. And the underspend is linked to the fact that some of the beneficiaries are employed permanently, which we obviously want to encourage. But then also the year before, we made a prepayment to the service provider to enable them to pay the stipends, and therefore there was an underspend in this financial year. In terms of the CPFs and neighborhood watches, there is approximately between 900,000 and 990,000 that have been allocated to CPFs and neighborhood watches respectively. Just trying to see if I missed any questions. I know David's going to answer that on school resource officers. And if there's anything else that I missed, maybe the colleagues can add. Okay, in terms, oh yes, in terms of the grant underspending, that is towards the end, and the LEAP underspend, and also the municipal underspend. The municipal years, financial years, are not exactly aligned to us. So in our financial year ends in March, they still have until the end of June to spend. So we are trying as far as possible to address that and ensure that the monies we transfer is transferred by July, at the first month of their financial year, to try and give them as much time as possible to spend. But that is the situation. In terms of, for example, the West Coast district municipality, the rollover request was denied because there were no funds committed for a specific project. So it's something that we monitor closely. With the LEAP underspend, there was an underspend of 377 million as well. But as I indicated, the municipalities usually make up in those last 3 months, first 3 months of their financial year, and the first quarter of ours going forward. So therefore, they would always not be an almost 100% spend, but we are trying to address that. So they spend in our financial year so we can reflect it as such. Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand over to David, and if I forgot anything, the colleagues are welcome to jump in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm David Kutsia. I'm the Chief Director for the Secretariat Safety and Security Program 2 and 3. That's most of the part of the annual report. So just on the school resource officers, so the Department of Education has an agreement with the City of Cape Town to deploy officers. That 2.8 million is what we contribute to the training of the school resource officers. So last I had the amount that were at more than 41 schools. So we've also at Security Risk Management developed this risk rating tool where the schools get risk rated, and then based on that risk, it's determined if they qualify then to have a school resource officer, and then we work closely with education with the placement.
Just if you can lift your hand off the mic, it's making just the sound that is.
So Chair, yeah, so as I said, then we work closely with education and in the City of Cape Town, and we monitor. So the effectiveness of the school principals, if you speak to them, they've indicated that they cannot actually do without the school resource officers and that they would actually want more. So that program is also being aligned closer towards LEAP, and that's the same commanders now that manage LEAP also assist with the school resource officers. And why we assisted education is because we train so many officers in LEAP, we get a better training price. So we assist in education so they can actually place more officers in their schools by the training going through our program, then them contacting with the city to do the training. Thank you, Chair.
To the Liquor Authority.
Chair, we don't have any questions. I think we just had one underspend at the beginning there in terms of the thing. I'll hand over to the CEO to deal with that detail.
Maybe just as an introduction, and if need be, the acting CFO can speak to that. Maybe just to say point out that If you look at the budget of the Western Cape Liquor Authority, you have an allocation being made at the beginning of the financial year, of course, and then there is a request for retention of some funds over that particular year. So you have an appropriation bill, and then your ultimate budget being. So I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that your budget ultimately, with the adjustment process, is then a larger budget that you had. I think what we also need to note in terms of the Western Cape Liquor Authority, that our budget initially has always, to an extent, been responsive to, I think, the operations by and large. So we were seldom in a position where strategically we could drive certain projects based on the budget allocated, which was always just basically covering operational aspects of the Western Cape Liquor Authority. When we started aligning our strategy much closer to the strategy of the Western Cape government, and we could indicate to what extent inspecting liquor licenses across the provinces and regulating them appropriately, we were then able to hone in on specific allocations being made for an outcome as far as strategic objectives are concerned of the province. With that being said, I must also just point out that initially the project around the extension of our capacity to inspect premises was a project initially. So it's a project funded based on that principle. With that, then having said, that would be an additional allocation, and within the adjustment that would be made. However, if you start the operations, you are running that operations based on the initial project funding, that business plans that you submit, and when the money then is okay during the course of the year, of course, you now have to pull it through to the next year. I'm just trying to sketch a scenario that understands or to reflect what the reality is in relation to the Western Cape Liquor Authority budget has been over the past number of years. But I will just then allow Selwyn to speak more specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, members. Yeah, so in terms of the underspending, I think your question.
Sorry, please just introduce yourself.
Sorry?
Just introduce yourself.
Oh, apologies. It's my first time here. So in terms of our budget, if you look at your, I think your question is relevant to. Oh, sorry. Selwyn Adams, acting CFO of the Liquor Authority. May I proceed? Yeah. So you will see that in the prior year, we had an underspending of 19.1 million. But in the current year, or the 2023 year, we only had 5.5. Now, essentially, if you look at page 115, it gives you a breakdown of how our budget was utilized. So in terms of the 5.5 in the current year, it essentially only relates to the walk-in center. So part of the 19.1 million of the prior year, we had the reason we requested the rollover, there were specific projects that we wanted to undertake. One of it was the walk-in center, but the project preceding that was the online platform. So we successfully then implemented the online platform project, and then subsequent to that, we needed then to roll out the walk-in center, which was supposed to happen within 2023. However, during that year, we also had a change of ownership in the building, so you need permissions and all of that. And then also the rollover gets then finalized by the end of November. So in terms of that, it put some constraints. We had plans in place. We had an architect that needed to proceed with work. He concluded, or he was close to concluding his work by the end of the financial year to give us specification for the walk-in center, but it wasn't in time, so we could not use the 5 or part of the 5.5. The other portion of the 5.5 relates to the project that the CEO referred to, which was the additional inspectorate, which was initially a project, but in the current, so a portion of that budget, because the contracts of the inspectors runs over 2 years. A portion of that is also unspent, but however, we are going to return those funds because we also got that funding baseline. So we don't want to retain funds that we already secured in the other space. So we're not requesting rollover for that funds again. Then also the walk-in center, we are not allowed to request rollover again. So in the current year, essentially, we wouldn't have a rollover because we've spent our baseline budget. And then the 5.5 essentially relates to the 9.1 million, which was rollovers from the previous year. So in terms of the authority spending its budget, it has improved from prior years to the current year, where we've actually spent our baseline. And the only underspending we essentially have is rollover funding, which we're also going to return because we're not allowed to roll it over. We do still need the funding for the walk-in center, but we've requested that to the retention of own revenue processes, where we've over-collected tax receipts on behalf of provincial revenue. So we are allowed to request for retention of that those funding. So they have again now a chance to assess our request and then obviously make a decision if it's then fruitful for the authority then to get the additional funding going forward. But in terms of underspending of our baseline budget, I don't see there's any underspending in the current year. But your question is relevant to the previous year. But as an authority, in liaison with the custodial department, in discussions, we've improved on spending of our budget because in terms of our mandate, we've obviously highlighted key areas of attention for the current years and the outer years as well. Therefore, we got the baseline funding for the additional inspectorate. So we are utilizing the funding and it's prevalent through our operations, and therefore you would find that our previous request to baseline those fundings was approved. Yeah, so basically that's the response to the question of the underspending.
Just there, yes, I've seen that. Can we, because I've just seen that there was Honorable Van Vogel who indicated that he wanted to ask question online. Honorable Van Vogel.
Order. Good afternoon, Chair and everyone.
No,
and
Chair, point of order before Member Van Vogel.
Yeah.
It's clear the engagement is in person. So whichever member that wants to ask the questions has to be in the house, because that on the parliamentary program is in person. Otherwise, we could have been all of us virtual, and also the department would have been on virtual.
Thank you very much for that. I understand that. If you might have listened in the beginning, I did indicate that after we finish, we will allow those people who are even online or in person here. But then there was the request from Honorable Rachel. I saw it when she sent me a WhatsApp. So I would like to give an opportunity to ask the question she would like to ask. Honorable Van Vogel.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, for the opportunity. Chair, I think my question on page 113 was partly covered by Member Seleko and the department, the HOD, also partly answered the question. But I would like the department also to tell us what are the updates with regards to the case open with SEPS. If we can get an update on that. And then secondly, Chair, my second question is on page 121. Point of reference there, the public, 4.3.
Sorry, Honorable Van Vogel?
Yes,
Can you
Chair,
please start your question because the minister and the HOD did not hear it properly?
Okay.
Chairperson, it's really uncalled for.
No.
Can I continue with my point of order? Because this is what we talked about.
Sorry, Honorable Maseko, I've listened to your request, but I've decided that I'm going to allow the honorable member to ask a question. Please continue, Honorable Van Vogel.
Thank you so much, Chair. Chair, my question was on page 113. But as I mentioned, Member Seleko covered me partly and the HOD answered partly. So what I want the department to do is also tell us what are the updates with regards to the case open with SEPS. Am I audible, Chair?
Yes.
Then secondly, Chair, my question on page 121, point of reference 4.3. That the Public Accounts Committee engage with the respective departments and entities and engage them on funds that were transferred to municipalities. Now, my question, what measures are in place to improve accountability over the safety plan, because we transfer millions each year to the city, but the committee never received any form of report back from the municipality. So how do we get these municipalities to submit quarterly and annual reports to the department and come and account before the committee on these monies? Then lastly, Chair, on page 168, part E, point of reference is irregular expenditure, not condone and remove. Can the department give us more details about this irregular expenditure and what was the money spent on and why the Provincial Treasury Condonment Working Committee felt it is not irregular expenditure? Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Van Vogel. May I please request Honorable Van Vogel, in future, if you want to ask a question and want to get involved in the meeting of the Public Accounts Committee, as a committee, we have taken a decision that we would like to hold our meetings in person. So therefore, I would like to appeal to you in future, if you want to ask questions, please come in person. I've just decided that I'm gonna give you this opportunity because you've made a request to me, but in future, we are not going to entertain such a request. Thank you very much, Honorable Van Vogel.
Noted, Chair. Thank you.
Honorable Bosman.
Chairperson, may I ask why the link for this meeting was only sent to some members? Because in the calendar request that we received, it says the meeting will take place in person and not virtually, and no link was provided to any other members. So why is it that some members are exempted from being in the chambers, but we are, and no link was provided to any of us?
Can I raise a point of order?
Thank you very much, Honorable Bosman, for the question. So far as I'm concerned, there is no link that was made available to any person. How the member got to get the link, I don't know. So therefore, I'm unable to assist you in your question. Thank you very much. Are there any further questions, honorable members, that you'd like to ask? Okay, Honorable Selego.
Chair, I think this question is relevant after the whole point of orders here. The liquor board, the liquor authority board, and I think the HOD has said that in future they need to be self-sustainable. Now, I just would like to ask the board, the authority, what measures have they put in place, going forward to make sure that they become self-sustainable? And also, how are they going to make sure that them going to the level of becoming self-sustainable does not close new entrants in terms of getting licenses? Because there might be a possibility of risk where one would consider the fees, that you would have to increase the fees as a result of the amount to get a license. It might actually limit the number of entrants into the sector. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Seleko. Honorable Ngondo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the responses from the department. My last one is a follow-up to the department on the LEAP, as the minister has confirmed that LEAP will continue. I just want to check with the department that with that confirmation, Minister, you are then telling us that in the next financial year, as we indicated, there would be budget for the LEAP. And I'm raising this with the looming cuts that have been indicated by National Treasury, and the fact that given that next year is a national elections, the risk to this particular program is, of course, as you indicated, that the biggest budget comes from the province, isn't Is that how I understand it in terms of percentage? The biggest part that funds LEAP is the safety plan budget that comes from the province, isn't it? Am I speaking Chinese? Do you want me to speak Xhosa? Is it? Yes. Okay, let me use my shop steward voice. Okay. In my other life, I used to loud hail, so don't worry. I was asking Minister, you have confirmed that LEAP will continue. Sharp. So it means you are confirming that there is a budget in the next financial year secured for LEAP. No risk of the cuts of National Treasury to this particular program at this particular point, as far as you are concerned as the department, that irrespective of what that is, this particular program is secured because in the main, the biggest component of its budget comes from the province, isn't it? And as long as, and I'm saying because there's a national elections next year, as long as this particular administration is kept, it means this program will continue. I'm not having a dialogue. I'm just wanting you to understand my question. All right. No, I don't want, because I don't want not to speak through the chair, you see, because now I can see we're having a dialogue. All right. I just wanted that confirmation, Minister. The questions to the Liquor Authority. The AG in its briefing to SCOPA makes mention, I think, of the program that was audited, which is the tribunal, and of that particular program, it only achieved 60% of its targets. And had spent 91% of its budget. The reason being the tribunal is to consider all applications within the legislative timeframes. It's not me, I'm reading what is here. Due to the complexity of some application, consideration and deliberations take longer than the average time spent on applications. And I can see in your book, in page 122, actually one of your spike or increased spending from the previous financial year is on computer and equipment support. And when you explain is that you had to increase expenditure due to the digitalization of operations through the online e-licensing process. Now I'm trying to understand, how is this tribunal program benefiting from this? I had asked from the audit committee and indicated that you'd be the best place to answer whether at these particular processes of the tribunal, at this point, that complex, that it could actually lead into delays, in completing whatever queries that it has to deal with. So I'm trying to understand this both from an IT point of view, because you had, increased spending, and I'm assuming that the tribunal should be benefiting in digitizing. But generally, whether do you have sufficient systems to assist the tribunal in dealing with these complex application processes that would lead to delays? So that's the first question I want to ask the entity. And then in your risks, once again, my question is, in the current economic climate, if we go back to governance, are your licensees at this point, do you believe, and I could see in terms of revenue that you were to collect, yes, you may have increased in the last financial year, but what you have budgeted, you could not. And I'm trying to understand, because everybody has been complaining that it's very tough financial years or economic climate. Don't you see this as a risk with your licenses, to be able to actually pay and comply with their own license fees? Is it not an issue that you have as an entity? And then going into the same page, page 122, please share with us what exactly are these consulting and professional services which you referred to that you had to undertake for key projects. What are those? What are those key projects you are referring to? And what is this catering that had to increase more than double from the previous financial year to this one? I can see you indicate that you had some municipal engagements to strengthen partnerships. I'm not sure whether that also is the contribution of the catering budget that actually had also spiked. And then also understanding what is social and education fund, and I can say that it went down drastically from the previous year. If you can just give some indication around that. And then in page 124 on contingencies, the case between yourselves and Mr. Venfolo, has the case been concluded? Is it final? Is it still on? When do you anticipate this case to be concluded? And then my last one on page 1, my two last ones actually. I see there is some contributions from DDET. If you were to explain to me for the monies that you get from DDET, what exactly are those for? And then the 9.1 million that you mentioned in page 125 that the entity received as an additional 9.1, what was it for? Thanks.
You under okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. It's just on the scope briefing note is that additional funding was allocated to the authority to bolster the enforcement unit. That's what that's what they say. But you were able to save on vacancies, even though money was given to you to bolster enforcement unit. Instead of bolstering the enforcement unit, you ended up not filling the vacancies. As a result, you were able to save cost on vacancies. So my question to you, would you say as an authority that your enforcement unit is fully capacitated? And why, if it is fully capacitated, why was there a request or why were you given additional funding to bolster the enforcement unit and not being able to fill those vacancies that you have requested? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, honorable members. Can we get the department and let's start with the entity if they want to start to respond.
Chair, thanks. I'm happy if the Minister wants to go, but yeah.
Thank you so much. Question that was posed by Member Winvogel during the previous responses, that particular question was fully ventilated in terms of the matter with regards to cover quoting, bid rigging, where it was one particular company essentially bidding for the same particular funding opportunity or assistance and then being caught, which is a proactive step from this government to make sure that any person even trying any unscrupulous or corrupt behavior that they will be caught. In terms of the 118, the 3,000, that question was also answered in terms of it was due to training of an official and the HOD covered that particular one very, even if it's 3,000, we take it very seriously. I'm still hot so that we have 3 billions in other commissions, but the 3,000 will be again answered. I just want to touch the one point in terms of Member Nkondlo. Thank you so much for the clarity seeking follow-up. I want to take elections out of it. The word elections out of it. I want to say that over the MTF.
Honorable Minister, are you finished with the questions that were asked by Honorable Van Vogel.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Just to rehash the questions but I think we fully responded to those questions. In terms of Member Nkondlo's follow-up, I appreciate it because I wouldn't want any misunderstanding. On the one point, and taking elections out of it, the MTF process. The MTF process is our midterm economic framework. We then, via national and provincial governments, ultimately sets out a 3-year cycle in terms of planning and funding over a 3-year period. I can confirm that in terms of the LEAP funding, that has been earmarked for that particular MTF period ending 2025-2026. So nothing to do with what is happening later in the year or an election, it's over the MTF period. Having said that, we are aware of cost containment measures. That particular documentation has already reached the South African Police Service in our province. And that also worries me deeply, considering that shrinking budgets ultimately affect service delivery. So, in essence, I would want to play open cards with this House and say, yes, LEAP has been budgeted for, but even if I come back to this House and I indicate to the House that due to the cost containment, there must be X amount of cuts to that program, I would want to come back and say, this is the result as a result of A, B, and C. And I would want to take scope into confidence in that regard as well. But as things stand, it has been budgeted over the MTF. But also, the cost containment is very specific in terms of the percentages that provinces must actually cut over the MTF. So for this current financial year, it's X amount percent, and the finance minister will publicly speak about it. And then in next financial year, the portion actually grows bigger. And in the final year, it actually grows much bigger, which is a concern, considering that we are not wanting to cut any program. We are not wanting to cut any intervention from outside, but tough decisions are going to be taken between now and the MTech process, where some programs will potentially be cut and others will potentially not be cut. But we will come back to this House and give full account of that. But it is a serious matter that has featured prominently over the last 2 months, but not what is happening later next year or next year. We want LEAP to work with SAPS.
Thank you, Minister. Just in terms of the case that has been opened with SAPS, the police are currently still investigating, so we do not have an outcome. That is the case of the bid rigging and the cover quoting. In terms of LEAP, the municipalities would obviously not be able to come and account before SCOPA because they have their own structures in place. However, that being said, we would be able to provide the necessary information which emanates from our own monitoring of the LEAP project. In terms of the 3,000, as Ministers indicated, I did answer it in the previous session, but I will answer it again. The official departmental employee was unable to attend training, but then was able to do so at a later stage. Us being cautious, we then submitted it as irregular expenditure, but because the official did attend the training and it wasn't regarded as wasteful, the irregular expenditure was therefore not regarded as such, so therefore was not condoned and therefore removed. The legal authority would obviously answer on the self-sustainability, and then I think Minister has also answered in terms of the LEAP project. Should there be cost containment measures, obviously we would have to consider cuts, but not to the actual rendition of the project. So we are hopeful that we will still be able to have the 1,000 LEAP officers on the ground. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair and members. Yeah, just to pick up on that self-sustainability issue, I think that we may be missing some of the context of the self-sustainability. Certainly the revenue that the Liquor Authority receives from through docks, we more than collect that amount of money from our liquor licenses. When we talk about self-sustainability, it's around the bigger role and responsibility the authority has to also deal with the issue of harms reduction. And in the context of that, we are introducing a differentiated pricing policy, which requires legal amendments to the Act to allow us to gather information so that we can differentiate between those liquor license holders who may be a small entity or an entertainment entity vis-a-vis the large macros and the large entities who similarly are paying the same sort of price for a license. So if you're doing huge turnover, you need to contribute more towards any of the activities of the Liquor Authority to administer your license, and also for you to contribute more towards the harms reduction process. So those two things are working in parallel. And so the self-sustainability is our efforts in approaching the increase in licenses until legislation is passed to give us funds at a greater than CPI level to allow us to accelerate that process, which we've been unsuccessful. So for the time being, it's pretty much at an equilibrium, and I'm comfortable to say that what we get from the fiscus, we give back into the fiscus. I'll hand over to the CEO and the CFO just to answer any of the other detailed questions. Members, thank you for those questions.
Chairperson, with your permission, I will briefly touch on the matter of the LRT performance, which was specifically around the target, 60% of targets being met. Could I basically just explain the following? All applications are processed in terms of very specific standard operating procedures, and timelines are adhered to in that regard. So we push up matters as we receive them, prepare them, and then submit those for the LLT for consideration. Once that is before the LLT, however, I think we need to mind that the complexity that is referred to is not so much, I think, the complexity of processing, it's the complexity of consideration. So what you find is that if there's a highly contested space within around a particular license, which means communities come in uproar, you have a lot of interventions happening at all levels within that specific community, then you'll find the LLT wanting to apply their minds properly in those instances. Also bear in mind that the Act is very specific. The Act requires the LLT to be satisfied that the granting of a license will serve the public interest. If it does not, then essentially you'll find that it's in contravention of the Act. Furthermore, I think it needs to be noted that I think also the LLT tries to prevent applicants from being just dismissed from the first hearing, basically, because strictly speaking, that would be one way in which to deal with the problem, is it not? If you're not complete in terms of you fail in proving to the LLT that you will serve the public interest if your license is granted. The flip side of that would be the LLT can then just simply discard the application and ask them to apply again. So I think I just wanted to mention that. The board is very, very as closely over the years monitored that specific target, and we referred to it in the past as backlogs that existed. However, once we unpacked the figure in greater detail and why the postponements are happy, I think the board became satisfied that the public interest debate is such a crucial debate. It will serve no purpose just trying to rush them through the process. I think that's just maybe to outline that. Then I think there was a concern raised that if we speak to the increase in a way, there's a risk that we may be introducing that less people or applicants or license holders will work in. What we have found, however, if you look at the number of licensed premises, we have seen a consistent growth in the number of licenses being granted. I can also say at this point that of all the applications received, these applications, I'm talking about new applications, at this point, strangely enough, more than 90% are still favorably considered. So it suggests that more licenses are successful in terms of their applications than not. And I think that is just something to be noted at this point. As far as the industry or the sector is concerned, what COVID has demonstrated is the industry is extremely resilient. And in terms of the elasticity within that particular environment, they have succeeded in surviving much better than other sectors. I think we need to recognize that. If you look at hospitality, that took a considerable knock during COVID, many of them survived based on their licenses that they had for liquor, as an example. So I think we must be cognizant of the fact that holding a license, a liquor license, the trade with alcohol is a considerable advantage within our society. And that is why we look at regulation in a way that we'd like to convince people to embrace regulation instead. So I think I'll point to that. With regard to the specific details around consultants appointed by the projects, just to say that specialized consultants were used in some of the funding that was received. Yeah, someone?
Yeah, thank you, Chair and CEO and members. Yeah, so in terms of the expenditure on 122, consulting and professional fees, that was related in relation to the architecture. So we appointed an architect to design a walk-in center for us. And also the online platform we used, in that process, again, we used Blue Gecko to provide further consulting and professional services, as they are the custodians of our liquor licensing system. So them together with the architect, as well as PayAt, who facilitates our online payments in terms of our online platform. So essentially, if I move then on to our computer and equipment support, that the increase in funding or in expenditure on that in that line item is due to servicing. So it wasn't for the LLT or for in-house, it was more to as a service-centric approach to our license holders. So it was to enhance their experience with the liquor authority. So the online platform provides them a platform where they can automatically renew their licenses instead of coming to Belleville and standing in queues or using just internet transfer payments. They can now pay at any store, for instance, Pick n Pay, Spar, and so forth, as well as in terms of they can sit at their own home and renew a license or apply for, or prospective license holders can apply for a license. So that is where that initiative went into, rather for catering for our license holders. The LLT does make use of our LMAT system as well. So there are systems in place, and we do look at enhancing the system for efficiencies as well, in-house as well. In terms of social and education fund, as the CEO mentioned earlier, in terms of the partnerships with municipalities, through that initiative, we spread our message in terms of social harms via that process. So you'll find that our conferences and seminars increase. Therefore, we didn't utilize the social and education fund because we already were serving that purpose. You're just finding it it's expressed in another line item, but it's not that we're not addressing that service delivery in itself. In terms of catering, post-COVID, we have obviously now done certain in-house training and seminars. We obviously requires catering. Also, some of our board meetings and committee meetings are now held in person instead of through conference teams and so forth. So that's where you find that slight increase in expenditure on catering. In terms of am I also yeah, so I think I addressed that. And then in terms of the 9.1 million, it is in relation to the additional inspectorate. So that was the when it was a pilot project, but that has now been baseline. So we won't request any additional funding in the future because we have that funding now. I think it has been follow case.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So with regard to the Venfolo matter that was referred to, that matter regrettably remains pending. We are currently consulting with council. We've picked up the matter because they have gone silent. I'm talking about the state attorney for a while, and we've been pushing this now to get some outcome around this. We are a bit concerned with the feedback that we received from the state attorney around this, because it would appear that the person that was working with the file retired a year or a few months ago, and now they're trying to build up what has happened with the matter. So certainly that is consultations that are ongoing right now. In relation to, I think, the Social and Education Fund, bear in mind that the Act specifically makes reference to a fund. Now, if you read the Act as it currently stands, and it would appear that it's a measure that more than 10 years ago was introduced in relation to the Act. The idea was to, as it were, mitigate the social harms and ills in relation to a clear dedicated fund that speaks to education and awareness programs. Also, it was purposed for to access, I think, funds from sources other than just simply internally from within the organization. However, the shifts that you have seen over the last number of years, and with the adoption and integration of alcohol harms reduction approaches, the entire entity is basically now positioned increasingly in terms of furthering harms reduction by facilitating public interest in a very particular way. If I can then just speak, possibly then also a rationale for the increase in catering has been because over the last year, or the year under review, we started in October, or shall I say in June, July last year, was to actively engage very key strategic partners. Those partners, for our purposes, as I've indicated at the session this morning, would be legislated partners. So one, we have to work with the DLOs, which is the South African Police Service. The other partner we have to relate to is the municipal services, SALGA and municipalities for that matter, because SALGA is then the gateway or the sedgeway for us to engage some of these for the municipalities. We have now, with the exception of City of Cape Town, traveled all corners of the Western Cape province, and we have brought them on board in terms of the processes. What is the advantages of that? We have now within each of those municipal areas are busy with developing problem statements. Those problem statements then inform our approaches to each and every license for that area. So we're developing an alignment, a synergy that enables us to strengthen our partners, which means what we want in those areas ultimately will contribute to what those partners want in their own respective areas. So that methodology is a very critical one for us. DDAT, for instance, last year, of course, DDAT responds to a number of things. So if DDAT receives a few calls and complaints around processes, they would then approach us. We are aware of the red tape reduction initiatives. DDAT is responsible for that. They have the unit, of course, and in our talkings and in our engagements, and when they started hearing of the things that we are doing at the Western Cape Liquor Authority, they were excited by that, and they indicated that they may have resources available for us to explore as far as certain projects are concerned. That having been said, our online platform is one of those, all right? And we got considerable funds from them in that regard. We were able to expend all those funds, as you may see from the financial statements, in terms of making that happen. So we now have the online. We have profiles that you are now capable of creating for each of our license. We are now in a position there where you can pay your license fee online as well. So we've made considerable progress as far as that is concerned. Then maybe briefly to touch on the member's question in relation to the inspectorate and whether that. So bear in mind, we did not have a budget for the extended capacity. So there was no budget there. The budget came from a project proposal driven that was presented, and the money that was availed in that space within the province, with the help of the department, we were then able to secure some of that fund. That then was in the region of let's say just under 10 million. That was done over 2 years. And in the last financial year, we pushed for that because we couldn't see ourselves going back. And what is the statement I made? Again, sorry, I may have made that this morning, was that for us to be effective, we have to see each and every licensed premises at least once a year. And the reason for that is simply, if you're going to believe, if you're going to basically exercise or implement certain provisions of the Act, you have to ensure you apply it consistently. And you can only apply it consistently if you can say you've inspected all of them and you know where they are at as far as compliance is concerned. Now, that is what we can do now. And with that, we can now introduce comfortably the provisions or apply the provisions of 64. So that basically then was the key thing. Vacancies there would have arisen, but it's just the turnover. Those vacancies, or actually those positions, mustn't be confused with other positions in the organization, I think, and maybe that is the one thing that we can draw clear from. We do, however, have to acknowledge at this given point in time that the entity was never granted a functional structure. I don't often relate to this, but I think it's critical now because ultimately a functional structure is designed based on paper in terms of what the mandate says and all the processes are applied to your mandate. That exercise wasn't completed with the detachment of the Western Cape League Authority from that. The Western Cape League Authority, however, succeeded over the last 10 years to grow despite that limitation. So what we now have, last year, if you ask me how many contract employees we had vis-a-vis permanent employees, that ratio would have been very disheartening. It couldn't and very risky. We can now safely say that of the 90 odd employees that we have, we now have 88 that are permanent on the structure. Now that stabilization is a critical, as a key indicator of, I think, the tight governance despite the resource limitations over these years. And in this regard, I think the board, especially over the last 2 terms, have done considerably well. Thank you so much.
I'm representing her, you're correct. Chair, just one follow-up to the Liquor Authority. Who is responsible for the implementation of the alcohol harms reduction policy and its recommendations? Is it you? Is it the Liquor Authority? Is it the department? And how is it funded? Actually, as a side issue, Minister, I think the issue of the location of the Liquor Authority would always be an interesting conversation that I think you must make the time, because between this ad hoc request of funding by DDET to the Liquor Authority, it's a clear indication. Liquor Authority is an authority that licenses businesses. So I would always remain with the view that it stands misplaced to be in a safety, a department that has got little to do with business or trade. But having said that, I'm just interested, that particular policy and that white paper and its recommendations, who is implementing it and from which funding is its implementation? From your general fund, from the department, or how?
In this manner, I think when it comes to a white paper that and how you get to a white paper, there's very specific processes that speak to that. So ultimately, you would have that being followed in a particular way. So when you have the white paper and its conclusion is ultimately when the executive within the province then have adopted that white paper, it's gone through a publishing process. It's been about comments being processed. All of those are taken into account, and then it's published in that. If that is then as a policy imperative, it stands. So the policy imperative for the Western Cape, strictly speaking, if you look at the totality of the recommendations, all of us, no matter where we are as entities within government, are required to reflect on the white paper and our contribution and role in that regard. So if you look at, for instance, social development, there's a clear indication what social development could do in terms of furthering alcohol harms reduction and the white paper. Where we are concerned in terms of compliance and the inspectorate, we have a clear mandate in order to pursue that, not only based on our mandate legislatively, but also that the policy now requires that we need to collaborate with other agencies in terms of pursuing that. There's a number of other recommendations, for instance, and these will speak to, for instance, advocacy, education, and what those departments need to do and to be able to contribute to that. If you're speaking specifically then around legislation or things that and the influence of legislation, then our department, also our custodial department, will play a much direct role, which is currently what is happening. So currently now you would look that the alcohol harms reduction, for two comments first, because I think it speaks and I don't want to enter the debate as to whether it's appropriate. But right now we can legitimately argue that the lens through which regulation is perceived is a safety lens. Right now, as the policy is outlined. So the policy is requiring us to consider what public interest consists of. And what public interest consists of now in that determination is then facilitated by us, but the determination is made by an independent quasi-judicial body, which is the Liquor Licensing Tribunal. In terms of where and how we harness all the other aspects, we have requested certain legislative enhancements that will speak to enabling us to regulate better. So we want to do away with adverts that do not reach the target audience. We want to we want consultation to be core and central to that. We do not want to accept incomplete applications, as an example, which is then holding up our processes, which then speaks to the numbers that we referred to earlier. So Chairperson, in response then to that, there are elements that we all contribute to. Right now, we do in relation to compliance. We're also speaking in relation to ensuring consolidating compliance or enforcement with other particular agencies. We also contribute and participate in the legislative review process, which was a strong recommendation within the alcohol harms reduction white paper. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Through you, Chairperson, we are always open to having that conversation. The CEO captured it so beautifully regarding the safety lens, but I want to give the assurances that we would always want to ensure that the public interest is first and foremost, because we wouldn't want alcohol to contribute to a lack of safety in our communities, but we are open to having the conversation.
No, Honorable Minister, you can always trust Honorable Nkondlo on that question. She's been very consistent around the location of the liquor authority. It looked like she is not about to stop asking it as long as we are going to be having these meetings. I see on my left-hand side, there's no questions. I think then if there are no further questions, Honorable Minister, there's a question I've asked the Auditor General, but I said I'm also going to ask when with you based on their briefing. I think it's on page 8 or page 9, page 8. Of course, you don't have this among your priorities that we are having achievements of planned targets. Priority 6 is social cohesion and safer communities, which is fine, it's understandable. Then priority 2 is economic transformation and job creation. Of course, I wouldn't relate that to community safety, job creation. And I just want to find out, how do you do that? Are there any examples maybe you can give of that, of the Department of Community Safety advancing an economic transformation and job creation agenda?
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted that this particular question was asked, because as a department, we care about young people. Every year, we place young people within the EPWP opportunity. And via the South African Police Service, a number of them then take up job opportunities legitimately in the South African Police Service. So it does create job opportunities, and it actually creates, in many of those cases, the 900 young people we help and assist on a yearly basis is actually contributing to an entire household. And those young people come from your most disadvantaged communities. So we do see that as job creation. It is also where they go on to further education and training, and that is clarified in that particular way. The second part, in terms of social cohesion, I would want colleagues to also be aware that the Western Cape Safety Plan specifically indicates that each and every department in the Western Cape government is responsible for social cohesion. So the programs and interventions must speak to that. The work we do with neighborhood watches, the work we do with CPFs. I'm quite perturbed that the incorrect infographic appeared online as we are speaking. And that particular infographic is largely incorrect. But we can have a conversation about that.
What is it about?
May I read it for the record? So that I can set the record
So
straight as well.
There are no holy cows here.
I sincerely trust that this particular infographic was not signed off by Member Nkondlo, but it says the Western Cape Government Department of Police Oversight and Community Safety gives over 7 million for neighborhood watches and only gives CPFs 900,000. This is against national policy. It goes on to say this exposes the underfunding to CPFs and DA double standards. It's firstly incorrect, but also I want to make the following comment. This actually goes against the spirit of what we are talking about. When we are setting certain narratives in the public domain, now CPFs are hearing this, and it sets a narrative. It breaks down the work we are doing. After this, I, together with some colleagues, we are going to Mitchell's Plain to have some more engagements, and it breaks down the spirit in which we are trying to cooperate. But I would love to have the further conversations. But I found the infographic very interesting.
I think that one, Honorable Minister, you can deal with it offline. It's got nothing to do with our committee. So no, that falls outside of the ambit of our meeting. So we always stay clear of those as a committee, so you can fight it off at another level. I think then, honorable members, in the absence of further questions, and I think also the department has also answered the questions. I think also, honorable minister, let me make use of this opportunity to thank you, the department, and the audit committees, as well as the Auditor General, and actually the rest of your delegation, for always being available and being there when we are actually asking you. As I normally say that when we are embarking on these sessions as COPA, we are not asking questions for the sake of catching you up. We are asking questions to actually enrich ourselves and the community that we are actually serving with more information and knowledge about what is happening in your department. Thank you very much. It's the incident that happened earlier. I sincerely apologize for it. It's not how we do things in the committee, just one of those unfortunate things, but I'm glad that it actually did not affect the progress of the meeting. We could continue with the meeting. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. You can be excused, and the Editor General, while we will continue with some of our activities.
Can I just say, and I wouldn't want to miss this opportunity, this might essentially be the last time that you are sitting in such a scope briefing. Can I say on behalf of the department and the Western Cape government, thank you so much for all that you have done. 15 years speaks to a legacy, and we are so delighted because, as you have seen, colleagues on this particular committee and on the Standing Committee for Community Safety care about the Liquor Authority and what the Liquor Authority is doing. So thank you so much, and we wish you well for all of your further activities. And amptenare baie dankie Thank you so much for all the preparation and to all of our colleagues for the questions. It helps us. It helps us to look at matters from a certain point of view because we are always wanting to have these engagements. So Chairperson, thank you. And to those that are online. Baie dankie.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. Yo, this is a big delegation, you know, eh?